This is an Urbinary interview. Urbinary. The podcast exploring how we understand and live urban spaces. Today, we're excited to introduce Barbara Piga, who is an associate professor at Politecnico di Milano and also the coordinator of the Laboratorio di Simulazione Urbana Fausto Curti. In this role, she leads research projects focused on experiential simulation and sensory urban design. We chose to interview her because her work uniquely centers on understanding the complex interplay between humans and their environment, both in theory and in practice. Barbara brings a wealth of knowledge about the importance of observation in our field, and her contribution is central for helping us understand how scholars can position themselves when observing urban spaces. Why is observing urban space through fieldwork essential for urban scholars and practitioners? And how does this practice contribute to understanding of cities? And what specific value does it bring to our work?
Thank you for the invitation. Hello, everyone. For me, the practice of experiencing city is actually a crucial piece of the design process. Since when you are in the environment, you can perceive it with not only all the senses, but even beyond senses. It's the experience itself is much more than considering only senses. And what you can understand, it's not only at the rational level, but it's something that goes beyond. So there are no simulation or representation of the environment that can substitute the on-site experience. So the in-motion, dynamic, and evolving experience is something that you can actually grasp only if you are immersed in the environment. And the level of immersion also depends on which extent the architect, in this case, is able to be there in that specific moment. Not only physically, I mean. So the importance is to experience the environment for understanding the condition of a given situation, so a given space in a given time, of course, and try to grasp all the elements of that environment. Then, of course, we can bring part of that environment in the laboratory, in the office, in the studio, whatever it is. And we can have a simulacra or something, a simulation, let's say, that can be represented in several manners in order to remember ourselves how the environment was and to work on it. Of course, one single experience in an environment is probably not enough, even if due to time constraints, it is difficult to leave the environment in a continuous way. This perspective is also, in this perspective, it is also very relevant to interact with people living that environment from years, for instance, or so residents or workers. So there is part of the experience that cannot be done directly. So there are indirect information that you can grasp, but also direct information that you can understand by your own experience. But of course, it's one experience, even if, of course, we are trained to think in like putting ourselves in other people as well. This is very, very difficult to do. And in any case, I believe that especially in our contemporary cities, it is very difficult to really put our heads into other people's minds, and especially considering that we are in a very multicultural era, and that there are different types of people, different types of background, different types of disabilities, different types of ages, and so on. So I believe that it is crucial to go in a space and to experiences, but also crucial not to forget that that is our own experience, and then we have to enlarge our mind in order to have a better comprehension of that environment from other perspectives. And the goal, of course, is then to create a design that are inclusive in all senses, in terms of origins, background, familiarity with the place, and also, of course, age, disabilities, or different moments of life of different people, gender. So every one of us, but even within gender, for instance, we are different people. So it's very, very complex to anticipate everything by ourselves alone.
That's very interesting, because we are trying to have a reflection on subjectivity on this episode, so it contributes to this discussion. So I'd like to move on to the second question. So in this subject of experiencing space, you have highlighted the importance of environmental psychology in understanding urban spaces. Could you explain what environmental psychology entails and why it's so significant in the study, observation, and ultimately understanding of urban environments?
For me, it's crucial because it becomes part of my research approach, and also it contributes a lot to design the methodology we are developing for some years. Of course, it's not only environmental psychology. It's opening our perspective to other disciplines. I think it's crucial. And I have to say that for me now it's a necessity. Let's say it's necessary to do so, because it's like you cannot really grasp what we are studying without other disciplinary perspectives. We see things. We are trained to see things in a specific way, but of course, it's impossible to even enter different disciplines working on the urban environment and on the people, on the environment itself. Now I explain what I would like to say. With let's say, a deep understanding of some phenomena. So, for instance, the urban environment, what I mean is that the urban environment is a system, of course. It's a system that is evolving in time and space, in time, basically. And it is composed by several elements. What I'm really interested in is the relationship between the person and the environment. But the environment is not only the physical environment. It is composed by vegetation, animals. There is the of course, weather conditions, and so on. And then there are people that are also part of the environment. They are the environment. They are composing the environment as well, but at the same time, they are our focus when we, the main focus, let's say, when we design our cities. So the idea is that we have to understand the mutual relationship. And so the action and reaction that we create, we're designing an environment. And if we are on the side of the people, let's say, there is sociology and psychology that are, for me, crucial, and especially environmental and social psychology are two disciplines. Are the same discipline with a specific perspective. That is very, very useful to have a better insight into the reaction of people to a given environment. So the psychologists are used to work with psychological constructs that are scientifically validated, and they are used to better understand the reaction of people to a given environment. For instance, it is possible to assess the emotional reaction or the cognitive understanding of a person moving through a space. And it is not like a simple observation. It's a process that enables us to measure the reaction of people, to interpret it on one side. So, for instance, we can define a reaction as a reaction, for instance, from the emotional perspective. The reaction can be, according to the Russell model, it can be active or activating or so the environment can produce an activation or deactivation, can produce positive and negative reaction, and the combination of those can describe all the elements related to the emotional reaction of people. So it can go from calm to fatigue, to happiness, to a sense of alert, stress, depressing reaction, and so on. And those are, of course, it depends on the person itself, that's clear, but also it depends a lot on the environment you're living in. So if we did some walks investigating this type of construct, and just to give an example, in 10 minutes, there is a wide range of emotion provoked by the environment. So, of course, for an architect, the question is, which is the role of architects in supporting an optimal experience? I have to be clear on this. I speak about optimal experience because, of course, we do not want to force people to be happy. That's not the goal. Mm-hmm. But we want to support people to create their own experiences, which are multiple, of course. We do not expect that all the people live the environment the same way. So the goal is not to design a place to make everyone enthusiastic, of course, but we support a positive, I would say more than positive, because again, maybe if I'm depressed, I'm subjective and an optimal experience for the person, for the different types of people. So we should have, in my perspective, a very inclusive design approach. Designing for all, it also means that you put all the people at the same level. So ideally, we even shouldn't speak about disabilities, because disabilities is because actually, from the architectural perspective, it's only right now, it's only because the place actually create a disability. Mm-hmm. We have stairs to take public transportation, for instance, which is an issue for some people. So it is not designed. But imagine that we have no architectural barriers for the different types of disabilities, because, of course, different architectural solution works different way depending on the person and the type of disability. So imagine that we have something that allows anyone to feel safe and to wander around the city, then we do not have any disabilities. We have different abilities, and the environment is supporting the optimal experience for everyone. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the role that we have in understanding the relationship between the person and the environment is super crucial, and it's also an ethical perspective that we should have, which is our role for society. How do we want to create better places, more inclusive places for everyone? And to do so, we have to better understand the experience of people in places. For instance, just an example, I was speaking with a visually impaired person, and he was telling me that the inner part of Politecnico campus, it's very confusing for him because of the soundscape, which is quite homogeneous everywhere. Birds and people chatting, basically. While instead, when he's outside, he can read, let's say, the street thanks to the sound of cars. In this perspective, for instance, electric cars are an issue. Mm-hmm. And also he told me that he could perceive the end of the block due to the little wind, let's say, breeze on the face, and can understand the morphology, let's say, of the city thanks to this. So all those elements should be very clear in the mind of people. But if you do not cannot have a direct experience, and it is not enough to put something on the eyes, of course. We have to enter the experience of other people much more deeper. So it is needed to work with other people, not to ask them, in my perspective, what to do, but to understand their perspective and then create the best option possible for enabling. Enabling to create livable cities, basically. Of course, this is one perspective. Then there is the perspective of animals, the perspective of vegetation. But if you think with a people-centered approach, of course, also the environment should work, because as we know, we are super connected to the environment. If the environment doesn't work, then we do not work as well. So that's the idea, let's say, basically. So that's why we develop a methodology for assessing the people experience in places and measure it. And of course, by the comparison of the different experiences of different, let's say, group, sample of population, then you can understand that one place actually has different geographies depending on people. And having these layers of experiences on the same place, then you can better understand how the place works today, and maybe using some solutions. We are working on this, like for instance virtual reality, augmented reality, and mixed reality, and solution like this. We are trying to anticipate the experience of people to future environment and to pre-assess this experience in order to be sure to validate the design solution that we put in practice.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I think regarding what you were saying previously, that we agree that architecture and urban design typically have approaches that are based on visual observation. So I think what you were saying is the importance of the senses in investigating, of developing a methodology that would investigate the senses. So I know that you have been working with students on experiential walks. Mm-hmm. So could you elaborate more on this concept, and how do they enhance our ability to observe and understand urban spaces through their different aspects?
It's more than senses only. Mm-hmm. Senses are a part of it, but that's why I speak about experiential work, which is not only perception through senses. And of course, in any case, senses are not only the ones we are used to think about. For instance, kinesthetic movement, so movement through the environment are crucial in understanding places. But then it's also our mind, of course. So we do not actually investigate specifically, the perception, the visual perception. We investigate how the overall sensory experience affects the inner well-being, let's say, the psychological well-being, basically. So far, we are also starting working with physiological sensors in order to understand the experience from different disciplinary perspective. In any case, it's a simplification, of course. We cannot really be in the other people, but we can tend to understand better the complexity of reality and how people experience that reality in order to design. So we modify the space, but the goal is to create to work on the void, so where we can live in, basically. And to do so, to enhance this perspective, it's from some years, a lot of years already, actually. I'm organizing walks, what I call experiential walk, with not only students, also with professionals or citizens. And the idea is that they can experience a place, opening their mind and, of course, their bodily experience to better concentrate on themselves and actually understand how they really feel in that environment, and then to communicate that experience to other people. So in the architectural perspective, so with students of architecture and urban planning, this is for me a very crucial assignment, let's say, that I generally do at the very beginning of any course I do. So the goal is that they do the experience. We generally do a walk in silence along a meaningful path. Then they go back and they take notes individually about their own experience, just to try to bring that experience in the studio. And then they start working with other colleagues, using what they thought and the notes they have taken with the others to explain the experience and to share the experience to other people. In some cases, they agree on the experience. In other cases, this is not the case, which is very useful to understand that we are working for a community. Then they have to act, of course, as architects, so they have to find a strategy to describe which was the main relevant experience throughout a 10 minutes walk. And they have to find a way to describe to other people that experience, but the goal is not to describe it at the conceptual level. The goal is to enable those people to have a similar experience. So the idea is not to describe, here we had, wind, and I was hearing the sound of leaves. The idea is to make the feeling, which is more related to emotions, for instance, to the audience. In some cases, this is directly connected to the understanding of where the people was in space. In other cases, let's say this is not mandatory. Mm-hmm. So it's like a sort of, let's say, music. So something that goes through space. So the representation of the experience, the communication of that experience is of course, evolving through time and space. So they generally produce types of representation that are evolving in time, depending on the experience they had in that minutes. They have no technical constraints, so they can produce whatever they want. The goal is to enable the people to first have the same feeling they had, and then only after that we can start reasoning about which architectural elements contribute to that type of experience. Mm-hmm. So, of course, the goal is we started from there, it's easier. So we started from the experience, then we only at the end, after the presentation, they give to others in which other people react. It is generally interactive, the representation. So there was people that, they did a song, or a song related to the different moment of the path. Other people did installation of physical elements moving through space with lights and sound and so on. So very diverse, let's say. And after that, of course, we started reasoning about why we perceive the space that way. And at the end, of course, the idea is that we take this experience into consideration when developing the design solution, and this generally is very impactful in the way they approach the design process, then considering the overall experience and all, of course, also all the multisensory elements that contribute to the final experience. So that's what I'm doing to support this approach. So, mm-hmm. So only at the end we go to the technical solution. But the goal, of course, is to remember that technical drawings, for instance, is only a metaphor or something mm-hmm. that is much wider. It's something that is the environment and the experience within the environment in mm-hmm. motion.
So you mentioned that these walks help us interpret urban environments in both physical but also social terms. So should we then consider the urban environment primarily as a socio-spatial system?
Absolutely, yes. In my perspective, even more than this, as I mentioned before, it's It's everything. I mean, it's everything connected. So it's also the perception that you have. So if you imagine that you feel unsafe in a given space, even if there is no one, the reason you feel unsafe is generally, in any case, dependent to the perception that you have of the social environment. Even if you see no one in the place. So of course, the social environment is super, super important, as well as the physical environment that contributes to generate some specific conditions. So how to say, yes, also what I think is that we always have to have a positive, let's say, open mind and positive understanding of a given environment. There are not environments that are only good or bad. I mean, of course, it's very mixed. We have to understand which are the elements that are already there that we can work on and bring them out. Which are the elements that we have to, let's say, contribute to evolving something different. So the understanding is really, really 360. So there is also a difficult task that is, as I mentioned at the very beginning, that if I am a woman in environment, 30 years old, for instance, is something. If I am a child in the same environment, if I am a great familiarity with a place, is something different. So also from the social perspective and interaction between people, we have to take care about all the elements. For instance, there is some of the other things that with the psychologists of Statale University I'm working with, in our methodology, we also consider the sense of community of a person and the sense of place. So to which extent people are attached to that place. And from the social perspective, it doesn't matter if a place, let's say, is architectural not very good, let's say, beautiful, if there is something that is very relevant for them as a reference of the community, maybe before transforming it or the way we transforming it is super important. So there is also a social part, let's say, that is in objects, in architectural objects, because they become symbols for them. So again, there is no distinction between, for me, the social part and the city, and that's why I strongly believe that an interdisciplinary approach is crucial. We divide things because we have to manage it conceptually. It's difficult, it's super complex, it's chaotic, the reality, no? So we are not smart enough, intelligent enough to manage everything without giving an order to things. But if we would like to understand things properly, of course, we need to produce a simplification, and we need to give a hierarchy that is relative to what we believe, to our ethical concern, and so on. Everything is relative at the end. So, but in this giving an order and simplifying reality, what I think we do not have to do is to divide the elements like the social and the physical. Exactly. It's a connection. Everything is systematic. No way. We have society in a building. We have the building in people. Of course. It's a continuous exchange that we have. So, and this is very challenging, of course. It's very difficult. And this is the difficult task, especially in the first years of architecture. Architectural studies. What we have to continuously have in our mind is that we are putting bricks somewhere, but the brick is the brick. Who cares? Today is brick, tomorrow is something different, it doesn't matter. But what we are actually designing, we have a direct action on the physical environment in order to have an indirect action, actually, which is the goal, which is the social environment, which is the livability of places, not only for social and not only for people, also for the rest. So the One Health approach that is now on the way. That is actually derived from other disciplines. An approach that considers all the elements that are present into the environment, that says that we have to take care of all the elements that are in the environment. I think it's very, very important. And as the biophilic approach stressed, is the relationship between nature and people, for instance. Mm-hmm. So I strongly believe that this is independently from the name, this is the type of approach that we have to work on. The other thing, if I can add, is that we work on this complex system, but I strongly believe that we have to work with an evidence-based and scientific approach. Not only, probably it's not enough. Well, also artistic way of interpreting the environment are very, very useful. So again, it's not one single perspective, but the scientific perspective should be, in my idea, much more into the process, which is not the case. Mm-hmm. Especially in this experiential perspective, of course. So measured and tangible and compared, for instance, different alternatives in terms of the action that those generate in the life of people is something that it is already possible to do, but it's not given into account, at least with a scientific method, in urban transformation processes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Could you tell us, from your experience with walks and with your research in general, which are the key methodological considerations to which we should pay attention in this self-ethnography exercise? And how can we effectively combine qualitative and quantitative tools during this process to gain a more comprehensive understanding of how we experience the environment through movement?
Yes, I'm also working on this subject. Of course, the way we travel through the environment affects the way we understand it and perceive it and experience it. So, for instance, if you always go cycling, as I do, from home to work, then in some days you start walking, you realize that there are a lot of elements that you have never considered, even noticed in, for instance, 10 years of doing the same path. So, of course, the velocity and of course, it's not only velocity, it's also where you are in relation to the street affect, and the attention you have to put to elements affect what you can actually perceive. So to have an understanding of the in-motion experience, we have to consider those elements, but also we have to consider why we are doing something, the personality, of course, because, for instance, I tend to go, I prefer to do a longer path, but beautiful, rather than a shorter one, but awful, just to stay on the extremes. So of course, it's the way we move through the environment also depends on the individual expectations and way of appreciating the emotion experience. We are not all equal again. So when we study these elements, of course there are different categories of things that you can take into consideration. One is it an active or non-active mobility? So I walk, I go on a bicycle, or go on a bus, public transportation, by car. Everything is different. Mm-hmm. Why I'm doing it, or it's not only from going to work, but it's like which type of work do I do? I'm flexible with the timetable or not. Everything is very relative. And of course, there are socio-demographic characteristics, and also it depends on the type of city. If you are in Milan, it's something. If you are in Rome or Naples, it's another story, because There are more flexibility hidden in the cultural perspective, depending on where you are, which is the type of city that you're crossing, for instance, which is the kind of possibilities that you have from go to point one to point B. Do you have alternatives or not? Mm. So one can be we can understand those elements by observation, simple observation. We can use, of course, mobile data. We can also track people. We can also ask them direct questionnaires, and all those elements goes from the more qualitative. We can do interviews for the more qualitative, the way we intend qualitative and quantitative, because of course these also differ depending on the discipline. To more quantitative analysis, in my perspective, of course, but this is logic. The more you are comprehensive, the more you understand the different nuances of the experience. But it also depends on the goal that you have. Mm-hmm. So it's not something that there is no one definitive approach, let's say. Also on the scale, the point is that if you would like to see things in a subjective perspective, then the subjective view is crucial, and that kind of experience is always one-to-one scale. No way. Mm-hmm. Then you can represent it in other scales, mm-hmm. but the experience is one-to-one. There are other methods, like using, of course, as I was mentioning, data from mobiles to understand where people generally go through the city, what time, and so on. That, of course, you generally look at the city from above and you draw lines. And you weight those lines depending on the time and space and so on. So it really depends on what you would like to understand. It's a very, very wide perspective. And even if you only consider the direct experience of people in spaces, there are several ways in which you can look at it. Like, for instance, we work on the emotion, cognitive understanding, the understanding of the wayfinding, for instance, within a place, the symbolic elements that that are relevant for you while walking, the reference that you use to orient yourself in a space, the feeling and the kind of experience you have every day, and how those commuting practice affect your perception of yourself in a given environment, the sense of safety, how this walking in a place affect your sense of belonging to that place, and so on. And we are actually working now on how to produce simulations, subjective simulations that working with different types of simulators, like the bicycle simulator and so on. To which extent are we able to reproduce and anticipate the experience of people in places in order to understand the sense of safety first, and then the overall experience they have in spaces. And again, this is of course crucial to better understand the relationship between the elements of the environment and the people experience in order to design better places.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. You referred to the sense of place identity, place attachment, and the emotional and cognitive connections that humans have with a space, or better, a place, and how those influence their overall environmental experience. How can we, in your opinion, as urban observers, identify and analyze these connections with place in practice? Why is it important to address place identity and other environmental psychology dimensions in urban studies and design processes?
This is an interesting question, because when I was starting working with the psychologist, I immediately realized that there are a lot of, let's say, intuitive mental action that we, as architects and planners, we put in action that are completely coherent with the scientific construct they work on. That's amazing. And we, especially in Italy, we are not that used to collaborate together. That's crazy because they work on the environment and the environmental perception. We work on the environment as well, and of course on, experience of people in places, but we do not interact too much together, which is a pity, because the understanding they have from the person perspective, it's very meaningful to us, and also it can contribute to the way we think, we put a design thinking in action, let's say. Mm-hmm. At the same time, the understanding we have of the environment and the way we approach the environment, it might be very useful for them to better understand some elements of what they are investigating. And so I think it is, so that's why we started collaborating together several years ago at Statale University. And the mutual exchange, the exchange we can have on this is very, 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 very interesting. And I realized that some of the action that we generally explain, for instance, to students, but design processes that we do it, let's say, at the intuitive level, can be described scientifically in a very clear way, and the concept behind the reason why we do some elements, and the fact, for instance, a great example in this perspective is the construct of environmental preference that was developed by Kaplan and Kaplan in the psychology field, and they said that. In very general terms, of course, the best, the way, the places that are perceived in a positive way, in an optimal way by people, is places that produce a great balance between a sense of understanding of the environment as well as a sense of nudging, like the feeling of would like to explore more the environment, which is the opposite of understanding everything. They are on the opposite extreme. So the balance between those two elements are generally, on average, the two elements that contribute to an optimal experience. So, of course, the typical example is if you are designing a labyrinth, of course, this is not the case, because the goal is to do not make understand how the setting works and to create. So the sense of exploration is super high in this perspective, even too high, because at the end you feel a bit lost. On the opposite side, of course, we have, if you design a square, an empty square that is immediately understandable is boring. And maybe you do not have the temptation to walk through it because it's something that is already there. There is nothing to discover. So there is a sense of discovery in this perspective that is crucial. And the combination of those also contribute to the unity and the understanding of a place as a unity, which is also, of course, so it is comprehensive enough in order not to make me feel stressed, but it is interesting enough to support, to left to me a bit sense of discovery. Mm-hmm. So it's not everything disclosed, or maybe there is a dynamic understanding. It is something that, okay, I have the feeling that is interesting, but I need to explore it. It's mystery. It is called mystery in the construct, indeed. So it's very interesting. So, I mean, when they describe me, then they are much better than me in describing this, of course. But when they speak about it, I was like, whoa, yes, exactly. This is what we have to do. And it's very useful because you can bring some of the things you have in mind at a more conscious level. And when you discover that you can even measure the experience of other people this way, then as an architect, you can better understand if your design project was working properly or not, or at least if it was working in the direction you wanted to give to that solution. Mm-hmm. This combined with other constructs, like the emotional one that I was mentioning, how the place is recognizable, but how it is also perceived in a symbolic way, creating a sense, for instance, of attachment to that place, and so on. Then community is sense of community is given by the place, but also by the community itself, of course, as we mentioned before. Mm-hmm. Place identity is something very, very, very important. And it's something that we really have to care about. Mm-hmm. So if you have to transform a place, to which extent to transform it, also should start from the understanding of the place identity of people, and which are the architectural elements, or maybe it's not the architectural elements contributing to create the place identity, but it's maybe the atmosphere of a place. So, which is the atmosphere that we would like to create, or if we are going to modify the atmosphere of places, we have to take care about it a lot. So again, it's about the intangible of places.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So I'm going to ask you a final fundamental question that we've asked all the interviews in this episode. What kind of observation should we aim for in studying urban spaces? So if we consider urban studies to be situated at the intersection of technical and humanistic fields, we may think that they face the challenge of balancing objective inputs, so like the quantitative part of information about the environment, and subjective judgments, which is the intangible single perception about the same environment. So should we strive as urban observers, scholars working on urban space, to set aside our own perceptions, or does our own perspective inherently shape the way we observe? And if it does, how should we position ourselves as observers?
Very difficult question. Well, I mean, everyone should find his own way or own way to do so. I mean, there are no one answer. I can tell you that in my perspective, empathy is very important. So being able of perceiving, I mean, considering your own perspective, of course, is also important. And in any case, we cannot do without. So, but also have an empathy in the respect of other people and try to be, or to perceive as they perceive. I think it's super, super important. I believe that we cannot really do without, otherwise we are working for ourselves, but this is not the goal of architecture. At least, I mean, if I'm doing my own house, okay, but if I'm designing for other people, no way. We have to understand. If we do not understand or try to understand as much as we can the different perspectives, how can we design a good solution? Okay, I have to, when I'm designing, I basically think to the reaction I would provoke in the communities of the place with my action. So what I'm caring about is not the physical element itself, but the reaction I would provoke. And in this, I have to take care about people and animals, vegetation, as I mentioned before. But I have to take care of the overall environment that would actually live there, especially because when we design, we generally then we give we give what we design to others, and maybe we even do not go there anymore. So it's a responsibility. It's an ethical concern that we have to have. It's a great responsibility that we have, because when you design a piece of a city, for instance, then it lasts for decades, and it's something that will really affect the way we not only we experience, but the way we are at the end, the way we live our short lives, it was amazing in this perspective that when I started working with my colleagues of biomedical engineers here at Polyme and tried to collect data about the physiological reaction of people and neurological reaction of people to the environment, we were discussing about the results. And there was a moment in which they said, well, of course, this is like this, and the results were not very, like, on average, the body reaction of people seems like not to be wealthy, let's say. Mm-hmm. And they said, but this is logic. We are in Milan, we are in a city, not Milan only. It's not Milan, it's cities. And cities generally contribute to reduce the quality of life, also not only from the psychological perspective but also from the physiological perspective. Mm-hmm. This is something we have to care about, of course. Mm-hmm. This would be much more evident in the next future. It is already like this, indeed, with the heat waves and so on. But it's not only when we have extremes. It's already like this. It has to do with the quality of the environment, quality of air, but not only that, also the stress and all the other elements. Then I'm not an expert, of course, but it's tell us something about, again, the necessity of being interdisciplinary. So the multi-vision that we have to put in practice while designing is, on one side, putting ourselves into other people perspective, and at the same time we should think as much as we can as in an interdisciplinary way, which means for me that we are the ones that should promote an holistic perspective, and then we have to collaborate with people that are professional in that field. So the role that we can have is to know that we have to collaborate with other colleagues from other disciplines, and then we have to make the synthesis. We are the ones that should be, let's say, that should manage and direct somehow all the understanding of all those elements and how those different perspectives interact one each other, because at the end, the architectural solution is in our hands. Mm-hmm. So we are a great responsibility. And of course, we also have to be creative and maybe go beyond traditional solution in order to produce better outcomes that maybe we were not used to have in the past. So it's already difficult enough, but there is another step that we have to do, that is to be visionary somehow, mm-hmm. creative and visionary. We have to, and to do so, we have to have in mind where we would like to go in. Of course, 100 years is something that we cannot really change, or maybe we can change little pieces. But where do we want to go? If you can do something, where do you want to arrive? And how can I start to do a little step to having in mind that every little step will produce a big change in the end? Of course, it's not everything on our shoulder. There is also a political dimension. But I strongly believe that sometimes we underestimate the role that we can have, and the fact that we also have to demonstrate, for instance, to public administration that it's not enough to speak with an architect. We have to have an interdisciplinary team evaluating the benefits, evaluating the different perspectives. That participation processes are not to convince people, but are to understand if the place and if we are doing, if our interpretation is correct, and our solution will really fit the situation. I have the feeling that we have an urgency of, we are already in the process, but I think that, and probably the environmental issues that we have to face will actually accelerate this process of mental shift. Mm-hmm. Hopefully.
Let's hope so.
Hopefully. That's of course my personal perception.
Yeah. I would say that I agree. Thank you very much for your insights. It has been really, really interesting, and looking forward to seeing your work, hearing more from the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Urbinary is produced in collaboration with Poly Radio and the Department of Architecture and Urban Studies at Politecnico di Milano.